title, the FAA is watching you. Here's what they see. Let me start with a question. When you're flying, who do you think is actually watching? Is it just air traffic control? Maybe the occasional pilot on frequency? Or no one at all? A lot of pilots, especially newer ones, believe that unless they talk to ATC, their flight is basically invisible. But the truth is very different, because today the aviation world is more transparent than it has ever been. Every climb, every turn, every altitude change, and sometimes even every mistake. The FAA can see far more than most pilots realize. And if you fly something as simple as a Cessna 150, a Piper PA-28 Cherokee, or a Diamond DA-40 Star, the system is still watching. In today's video, I want to explain what the FAA actually sees when you fly, how they see it, and why understanding this matters, especially if you're a newer pilot thinking about buying an airplane. Because whether you're flying a Cessna 172 Skyhawk, a Cirrus SR-22, or something far more advanced like a Pilatus PC-12 NGX, the data trail you leave behind is surprisingly detailed, and many pilots don't realize just how permanent that trail is. Let's begin with something called ADS-B. A lot of pilots treat ADS-B like it's just another avionics feature, something that appeared a few years ago, got installed in airplanes, and now it just quietly works in the background. But ADS-B fundamentally changed aviation surveillance. Before ADS-B, radar updates could be slow and sometimes incomplete, especially at lower altitudes. Now aircraft broadcast their exact position once per second. Latitude, longitude, altitude, ground speed, heading, all transmitted continuously. So when you're cruising along in a Cessna 182 Skylane, a Piper Comanche, or a Socata TB-20 Trinidad, your aircraft is essentially announcing where it is, every second. And those broadcasts are received not just by air traffic control, but by hundreds of ground stations, some operated by the FAA, others by private networks. But here's the part that surprises people. Once that data exists, it rarely disappears. Many flight tracking systems store this information indefinitely, which means your flight path from 6 months ago, or even several years ago, can often still be reconstructed. Imagine flying a weekend cross-country in a Beechcraft Musketeer Sundowner. You depart a small airport, cruise at 5,500 feet, and land at a quiet rural strip. You may feel like it's just you and the sky. But the reality? That entire flight probably exists in a database somewhere. Now that doesn't mean anyone is watching every flight. That's an important distinction. The FAA isn't sitting in a room monitoring every Grumman AA1, Pipistrelle virus SW, or Aeropract A22 Foxbat crossing the countryside. But the data is there if they need it. And that's where things get interesting. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this perfectly. A pilot flying a Cessna 177 Cardinal once made what seemed like a minor mistake. He entered controlled airspace without contacting ATC. It wasn't dramatic, no conflict with other traffic, no immediate safety issue. But weeks later, he received a letter. The FAA had reconstructed the flight path using ADS-B data. They could see exactly when he crossed the airspace boundary, exactly what altitude he was at, and exactly how long he stayed there. That level of detail would have been almost impossible decades ago. But today, it's routine. Now here's where I want to pause and ask you something. Do you think this level of visibility is a good thing? Some pilots believe it dramatically improves safety. Others feel it introduces too much oversight into general aviation. There's a real debate about this in the aviation community, so I'd love to hear your opinion. Do you feel comfortable knowing that every flight leaves a digital trail? Or do you think aviation has lost some of its privacy? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them, and these discussions are always fascinating. Now let's talk about another layer of visibility. Because the FAA doesn't just see position data, they also see patterns. And patterns can reveal a lot about how pilots operate. For example, imagine two aircraft, a Cessna 172 Skyhawk and a Mooney M20U Ovation Ultra, both flying cross-country routes regularly. Over time, analysts can see how those aircraft are typically flown, climb profiles, cruise altitudes, descent patterns, even how consistently pilots follow recommended procedures. This kind of data isn't usually used to target individual pilots, but it helps regulators understand trends. For instance, if many pilots flying Cessna TTX aircraft are descending too quickly into busy airspace, that pattern becomes visible, and sometimes new guidance or training recommendations appear as a result. Another interesting example involves high-performance aircraft. Take something like the Lancair 4P or the Epic E1000GX. These airplanes are extremely fast. A pilot transitioning from something slower, like a Piper Cherokee 140, 160 horsepower, or Cessna 150, might initially struggle with energy management. ADS-B data can reveal things like steep descent rates or unstable approaches. Again, the FAA isn't usually chasing individual pilots for this, but aggregated data can highlight safety concerns, and that eventually shapes training standards. Let's move up another level. Because the surveillance picture becomes even more detailed when you enter turbine aircraft. Imagine flying a Daher TBM 960, a Pilatus PC-12, or a Quest Kodiak 100. These airplanes routinely operate in busy airspace alongside airline traffic. Their ADS-B signals integrate into the same surveillance network used for commercial jets, which means their position accuracy is extremely high. Now, step into the jet world. Aircraft like the Cirrus Vision Jet SF-50, Honda Jet Elite, or Cessna Citation Longitude operate in highly structured environments. Every flight plan, every altitude change, every ATC instruction, recorded and logged. Move even higher into aircraft like the Embraer Praetor 600, Gulfstream G800, Falcon 10X, or the upcoming Global 8000, and the level of operational oversight becomes even greater. At that level, flight data monitoring systems often track aircraft performance internally as well. So between the aircraft systems and the external surveillance network, the amount of information recorded is enormous. But here's something many pilots don't realize. Even smaller aircraft can be tracked publicly. You've probably seen websites where you can watch airplanes move across the map in real time. Many of those flights include aircraft like the Diamond DA-62, Piper Seneca 5, Beechcraft Baron G58, or Tecnam P2006T. Even aircraft operating from small rural strips, like a Cub Crafters X-Cub, Piper PA-18 Super Cub, or Aviette Husky, may appear if they carry ADS-B. And amphibious aircraft like the Icon A5 are no exception. If the equipment is onboard and transmitting, the signal exists. Now here's the important part. Visibility doesn't automatically mean enforcement. The FAA's primary goal is safety, not punishment. In fact, many investigations begin not with surveillance, but with voluntary reports. Programs like NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System encourage pilots to admit mistakes in exchange for learning opportunities rather than penalties. So even though the FAA can reconstruct flights in great detail, they often prefer cooperative safety improvements over strict enforcement. Still, the data is there when needed, and that changes how aviation operates today. Let's talk about something else the FAA sees: altitude discipline. Imagine three aircraft flying near each other: a Cessna 210 Centurion at 6,500 feet, a Diamond DA-42 Twin Star at 7,500 feet, a Beechcraft Bonanza G36 climbing through 7,200 feet. With modern surveillance, controllers and analysts can see these interactions clearly. Even small altitude deviations can be detected, and if two aircraft come closer than expected, the event may be recorded and reviewed. This kind of monitoring has significantly improved mid-air collision prevention. But again, it means the system is very aware of what's happening in the sky. Now let's bring this back to newer pilots. If you're thinking about buying your first airplane, maybe something like a Cessna 182 Skylane, Piper Saratoga, or Vans RV-10, this level of visibility shouldn't scare you. In fact, it's one of the reasons aviation safety has improved so much over the years. But it does mean professionalism matters, even on casual flights, even when you're just exploring local strips in a Zenith CH-750 STOL, Kit Fox Series 7, or just aircraft Superstol, because every flight contributes to the bigger picture of aviation safety. Before we wrap up, I want to hear your perspective again. Do you think this level of tracking improves aviation? Or do you miss the older days when flying felt more anonymous? And if you're flying something unique, maybe a Sling TSI, Diamond DA-50RG, or even a bush aircraft like the de Havilland Canada DHC-2 Beaver, have you ever checked your own flight tracks online? It can be surprisingly interesting to see your own flights mapped out after the fact. Let me know in the comments. The skies may feel wide open, and in many ways, they still are. But today's aviation system quietly records more than ever before. From a small Piper Cub J3 drifting over farmland to a Honda Jet Elite 2 climbing through flight level 400, every aircraft leaves a signature. And understanding that system, rather than fearing it, makes you a smarter, safer pilot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.